Hi, my name is Nyoun William. I am from South Sudan, and I am going to speak to you on issues related to legal framework that I will call them the gender equality laws in South Sudan, or laws that protect women and girls in South Sudan. So to begin with, I will say that South Sudan's legal framework provide a very solid normative foundation for protecting women and girls. The 2011 Transitional Constitution of South Sudan amended with other acts like other legislation such as the Penal Code Act of 2008, the Child Act of 2008 amended, the Land Act of 2009, and the General Education Act, among others, of 2012, they both collectively reaffirm or affirm the right to gender equality. They also highlight the protections from gender-based violence. They also provide property ownership and inheritance rights, and political participations and access to education, among others. These instruments reflect a formal commitment to equality and in principle aligned with the international human rights standard that South Sudan is actually part of. The Constitution holds a particular important place in the country because it's the mother law. In the Constitution, Article 16 as amended, it provides women with 35% affirmative action, a very great threshold that allows women to participate in public institutions and also represent women in across all public offices or public institutions. This is a very great step forward, although there is challenges with the implementation that I will talk about later. We have also the act such as Penal Code Act, which also talk about the criminal law that, further strengthen protection by making rape and female genital mutilations a punishable offense. Land Act also recognizes women's right to own and inherit lands and properties, which is also another step making a crucial statutory step forward economic equality or economic empowerment. The Child Act safeguards girl children and girl child from discrimination and harmful practice, and also General Education Act ensure that pregnant learners or pregnant girls who drop out of schools have the right to remain in school whenever they want, and also to continue with their education afterwards. So collectively, this legal provision demonstrates that South Sudan commitment to gender justice even as challenge remains. So there's that hope for the country. However, the primary challenge is the enforcement, not the legislative gaps. Although there are other areas where there are legislative gaps, but I think the enforcement is one of the big first challenge I will talk about here. A number of structural weaknesses continue to undermine effective protection. First, the substantive gaps persist in the criminal laws framework. Addressing gender-based violence, which doesn't have a standalone act, is a very big problem. South Sudanese women groups and civil society and other human rights organizations have submitted the anti-GBV bill for the last couple of years in a way, and it has remained in the parliament, has been tabled but not really been enacted, so it's still as a bill, but consultation has been made. So this is one of the biggest challenge, because as much as there is that provisions in the penal codes, there is a need for the standalone GBV bill. And also the exclusion of marital, which will also address things like the marital rapes, and which has been excluded from the penal code, which is also a significant limit. That is a significant limit to scope for the protection for women in intimate relationship, and also things to do with gender-based violence, apart from like just intimate of sexual offense or something like that. So things to do also with the general GBV will be addressed by this bill when it is enacted into law. That is a very specific gaps, I would say. And also laws that would have a civil protections, often rely on a general criminals provision that do not adequately capture the realities of domestic abuses. Secondly, the country operates under a plural legal system in which customary court play a dominant role in resolving families' inheritance custody of children or child custody, community dispute where women might get involved on issues related to communities, and while customary justice structured are accessible and culturally embedded that favored male over female. So the decisions may at times conflict with the constitutional guarantee of equality and statutory protection under the land, for example, the land law, all the laws that I mentioned. Given that our societies are shaped by patriarchal norms and customaries that are very lenient toward toward men. Thirdly, I would say that although we have the 35%, there's a lack of structural enforcement mechanism, such as the compliance, which is not being really put into place by the parties. There has been a very limited access. We have, out of 5 vice presidents, there are only 2 women. Of course, but then there are out of 10 governors and 3 administrative areas, there's only 1 deputy governor. And there was 1 governor earlier. So this is not even 25%. Let's not talk about 35%. So there is a limit there's a challenge and constraint in the implementations. And also when you look at the ministerial positions, is all across the board. Fourth, there is institutional coordination among enforcement action, which is very limited, like the police protection authorities, customary court, ministries, and human rights commission, both operate under overlapping mandate. And each has lack a fully standardized referral pathway that will allow, women and survivors of GBV, for example, to channel the reports or where to seek redress. So there is an overlap in the coordination among these institutions. This challenge they required a coordinated reform strategy and bridge the gap between the normative guarantee and then the practical implementation. I would say that South Sudan is party to other international law, like the Maputo Protocol, the NAP, which is the National Action Plan to domesticate or localize the 1325, but the implementation remains a big challenge too. Given that the country is in war and country have its own priorities, this raised a very serious alarm with how women should be protected. Given the countries in war as well, I would say that things like the conflict-related sexual violence, they required a specific laws that should protect women and that should enforce accountability so that perpetrators are brought to justice and victims or survivors are protected. So I would say that reform should be faced in a short term, because there is a need for accountability, there's a need for protections. It is important that there is a need for women protection. Although South Sudan's challenges, that doesn't mean it's an absence of law, but it's just that the enforcement of already existing law required to be put into place, Girl child education is at a very high rise in South Sudan. We have a number of cases where girl children has been married off. We have issues of gang rapes among the young girls due to, these streets boys doing their own, and accountability has been very limited. Thank you so much.